He was not a monster in a movie, nor a demon in a legend. He was a teacher, a husband, a Soviet citizen, and he was also one of the most brutal killers in modern history. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo, the Butcher of Rostov. He raped, mutilated, and murdered more than 50 people, most of them children. He outsmarted the Soviet police for more than a decade, and the most disturbing thing, no one suspected him. In a small village lost among the fields of Ukraine, a child was born. A child who over the years would become one of the most disturbing murderers of the 20th century. Yabloch Noye, October 16, 1936. While his mother raised him in misery and hunger, his father was a prisoner of war under the Nazis. And his older brother, well, according to his mother, he had been kidnapped to be eaten by desperate neighbors during the Soviet famine. A story so brutal it seems made up, but for Andrei, it was a truth burned into his heart. There is no document confirming Stepan's existence, but the seed of trauma was already planted. At school, Andrei was invisible, a nearsighted boy who refused to wear glasses, a boy who wet his bed until he was 12, an easy target. He was pushed around, called names, scorned, and he just accepted it. He grew up in silence, watching, storing all that hatred in a dark corner of his mind. When adolescence came, he felt for the first time what would be his doom: sexual impotence. He had a girlfriend, a brief relationship, but when he tried to consummate it, nothing. And so, like everything he loved, she too abandoned him. He served in the army, wanted to be a lawyer. He failed the exam, but he was obsessive, smart, ambitious. He got 3 university degrees in engineering, in Marxism, Leninism, and in Russian language and literature. Translated with deepl.com, free version, in 1971 he graduated as a teacher, an achievement that would soon become his perfect mask. But the darkness was already in him. He would sneak into school dormitories to watch girls in their underwear. He would masturbate with his hand in his pocket. His addiction wasn't just sexual, was one of power. The power to look without being seen. The power to be in control. In 1974, his behavior crossed the line. He abused students, boys and girls. He was fired. But he was never reported to the authorities. No one wanted to tarnish the name of the institution. And so, the monster continued to walk free. Up to that point, Chikatilo had not killed, but he was getting closer and closer. The frustration, the hatred, the need, it was all building up. And when it was finally unleashed, whole Russia trembled. December 22, 1978. A 9-year-old girl, Yelena Zakotnova, was walking alone in the street in the city of Shakhty. A man, kind and quiet, approached her. He promised her sweets, warmth, confidence, and he took her to a remote hut. There, he tried to abuse her, but he couldn't. Her body didn't respond. Her frustration did. He attacked her, stabbing her 3 times in the abdomen. And just then, she felt a relief. It was the first time he understood that his body found some satisfaction through the suffering of others. The dying girl managed to say something in a weak voice. He choked her unconscious, and then he threw her into the Grushevka River as if she were a disposable object. 2 days later, the body turned up under a bridge, and the evidence pointed to him. Blood near his cabin, witnesses who saw him with the girl, the backpack on the opposite bank of the river. Someone even recognized him at the bus stop where she was last seen. But the system failed. It blamed another man, Alexander Kravchenko, an ex-convict. He was executed, and the real killer vanished into the crowd. 3 years later, he killed again, and this time, the beast would no longer stop. September 3rd, 1981. Larisa Tkachenko, 17 years old, prostitute. He persuaded her to go with him to the forest. He could not consummate the act. She made fun of him, and that was his sentence. He strangled her brutally. He ejaculated over her corpse, and then he unleashed his fury, bit her neck, cut off her breasts, and took parts of her body. Third victim, Lyuba Biryuk, stabbed more than 40 times in the forest. He mutilated her eyes, a detail that would become a hallmark. He believed that if a person died with his eyes open, he could keep his image in the afterlife, and he didn't want to be remembered. That same year, he murdered 3 more people, including his first child, Oleg Podzivayev, 9 years old. The body was never found, but he confessed that he tore off his genitals with his hands. Each crime was more cruel, more animalistic, more methodical. 1982, Olga Stalmachenok, 10 years old. He found her on a bus. He took her by the hand like a protective father and took her to a cornfield. He stabbed her more than 50 times. He ripped out her breast. He removed her uterus and part of her intestine, as if it were a perverse torture. 1984, the number of victims was rising unchecked. There were already at least 15 boys, girls, adolescents, runaways, vagrants, the invisible ones of the Soviet system. They were all easy prey. I would accost them at train stations, at bus stops, and with an empty promise, he would take them to the forest. There, darkness became his kingdom. He inflicted 30 to 50 stab wounds. He would mutilate their eyes. For the girls, he would cut off their nose, their breasts. Sometimes they were missing arms, legs, genitals. And yet, he was still walking free in the crowd, in a suit, with briefcase, with family, with a smile that hid a butchery. Andrei Chikatilo did not kill out of hatred. He killed because only in death did he find his satisfaction. After leaving teaching, Chikatilo began working for a company that distributed building materials in Rostov. That change marked a new turn in his life. The job forced him to travel constantly, and that travel became the perfect alibi to continue committing his crimes in different cities in the region, far from any immediate suspicion. In 1984, the figures were already chilling. According to data rescued by the newspaper La Nación, Chikatilo had claimed the lives of at least 24 people. Women, children, teenagers. All victims of a killer who slipped away like a ghost in the vast railway network of the Soviet Union. That same year, his behavior attracted attention again. A policeman arrested him after observing him insistently approaching several young women at a bus stop. However, there was insufficient evidence to hold him. And here comes one of the most shocking aspects of the case. At that time, the Soviet authorities did not accept the existence of serial killers in their territory. They considered it a phenomenon exclusive to the Western world, something typical of decadent American capitalism. This denial was decisive. It not only hindered the investigation, but also prevented the media from reporting freely on the crimes. The news was silenced, and with it, the social alarms that could have stopped the chain of atrocities in time were also extinguished. 1984, the police had a mystery on their hands. A killer who lurked in the shadows, but never left enough prints. From the semen found on the bodies, a disturbing detail was identified. The killer had blood type AB. And, in September of that year, a man was arrested at the Rostov market. It was Chikatilo, a man who matched the description of the criminal. But after a blood test, his blood turned out to be Group A. He was immediately released. But the investigation continued. More than 26,000 suspects in the police files, and when victim number 30 turned up, the press started talking about a possible serial killer. They called him the man without a face because no one had seen him clearly. Despite the voices that considered him a simple, weak-minded man, the police knew something didn't fit. The victims appeared far away, scattered, and the killer must have had the means to move quickly, something that was not common in Russia, a vast country. Soon after, Chikatilo was arrested again, this time for a theft of linoleum from his office. And although his behavior raised suspicions, the case seemed trivial. He was arrested for inappropriate behavior at a bus station, but again, they found insufficient evidence to link him to the murders. Because of a procedural error, the blood test never linked him directly to the victims. But the police kept him in their sights. On October 17, 1990, the killer struck again. And this time, the police had him almost at their fingertips. In the days that followed, the operation intensified. Hundreds of detectives were deployed in the nearby woods, searching for a man who, unbeknownst to them, was toying with them. Until, on November 6, 1990, a sergeant named Igor Rybakov saw something strange. A man, dressed in a suit and tie, came out of the woods. His hands were dirty, one finger bandaged, and his face stained with blood. Rybakov watched him without knowing that he had before him the man he was looking for. He asked him for the papers. There was no reason to arrest him, but he made a record of the incident. The next day, a girl was found dead in that same area. The police knew the culprit must have passed through that station, and the pieces fit together. On November 20, Chikatilo was arrested, already suspected of killing 36 people, all women and children. Although his blood prints did not match those found on the victims, the semen did match AB, as did the killers. That day, Chikatilo, calm and soft-spoken, expressed, "How can they do this to someone my age?" But the police didn't let him get away. Calmly, he led the detectives to the places where 3, as yet undiscovered bodies lay. Cameras filmed his arrest, and the horror was slowly unraveling. On November 27th, Chikatilo promised to help the police locate more victims in exchange for the cessation of interrogations that made him relive his crimes. Just 2 days later, he collapsed in front of a psychiatrist, and he confessed to 52 murders. That man who had lived in the shadows, who walked among everyone without arousing suspicion, finally gave up. Andrei Chikatilo was not only a murderer, he was a shadow within a shadow, and his capture at last brought to light the truth that everyone feared. After years of terror, Andrei Chikatilo finally faced justice. Accused of 53 aggravated murders, many of them with an inhuman level of cruelty, some victims were emasculated while still alive. His trial promised to be as disturbing as his crimes. Psychiatrists at the prestigious Serbsky Institute ruled that he was not a madman, but a methodical sadist, fully aware of his actions. In other words, he was legally sane. In the courtroom, the parents of the victims looked him in the eye, with the desire to tear him to shreds. They begged to let them lynch him. The tension was so extreme that the authorities kept him locked in an iron cage to prevent them from attacking him. The trial began in April 1992 and lasted until October. Chikatilo, with a shaved head, seemed to enjoy the attention at first. On the first day, he held up a pornographic magazine in front of the cameras, as if mocking the world. But soon, his facade crumbled. In an act as grotesque as it was desperate, he removed his clothes, shook his member, and shouted in front of the court, "Look at the futility! What do you think I was going to do with this?" The judges did not hesitate. On October 15, 1992, Andrei Chikatilo was sentenced to death. He was placed in solitary confinement. On February 14, 1994, the Butcher of Rostov was executed with a shot to the head. His body was buried in an anonymous grave. No name, no flowers, no redemption. Thus ended the life of the greatest serial killer in the history of the Soviet Union. But his crimes, his coldness, and his madness continue to freeze the blood to this day. When the monster falls, his shadow doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. After the arrest of Andrei Chikatilo, his family was marked, as if they wore a curse written across their foreheads. They were harassed, threatened, even attacked. One night, someone poured gasoline on their front door and set it ablaze. That was when they fled to Kharkiv, Ukraine. They changed cities and names. No longer the Chikatilos, they became Odnachev, the mother's maiden name. His widow, Eudosia Odnacheva, once ran a kindergarten. She had to resign when the world learned who her husband really was. She spent her final years selling goods in a local market, far from the scandal, the trial, and the story. The daughter, Ludmila, had cut all ties with her father before his arrest. The reason? During a visit, Chikatilo inappropriately touched his own grandson. That was enough. She never spoke to him again. But it was his son, Yuri, who carried the heaviest burden. He fought in Kandahar, Afghanistan. He was wounded, and when he returned, he fell. Rocket launcher theft, extortion, prison, then prison again. In total, he spent 12 years of his life behind bars or on probation. His life became a cycle of crime, collapse, and broken promises. In 2009, he was accused of attempted murder. A drug addict had been stabbed and named Yuri as his attacker. Yuri claimed innocence, said the man stole his car, got into some fight afterward. But the doubt always lingered. And the most disturbing part, Yuri doesn't deny his father. He idolizes him. He believes Chikatilo didn't kill 52 people, that he was a scapegoat of a corrupt system. And even more unsettling, he named his own son, born in 1993, Andrei, in honor of his grandfather. The story of Andrei Chikatilo didn't end with his execution. It lived on, in the aisles of a market, in prison files, and in the name of a child who never asked to inherit that legacy. Evil doesn't always wear horns. It doesn't always scream or crawl in the dark. Sometimes it wears a suit. It smiles, goes to work, has a family. Andrei Chikatilo was one of the most monstrous killers in modern history. But the truly terrifying part wasn't just his crimes. It was how long he went unnoticed, hidden in plain sight. While justice delayed, dozens of children vanished. Mothers buried pieces of hope, and an entire family learned that sometimes hell isn't below us, it's inside the home. This isn't just the story of a killer. It's a story about a society that refused to see, about mistakes that cost lives, and about scars that remain long after the final shot is fired. The story of Andrei Chikatilo doesn't just reveal how dark a human being can become. It shows how easy it is to look away until it's far too late. His case is a twisted mirror, reflecting what happens when justice breaks, when systems fail, and when silence becomes an accomplice. Today, decades later, the echo of his crime still haunts us, not only because of the lives he stole, but because of the truth he forced us to face. That evil doesn't die with the killer. It leaves roots, and those roots grow in the soil of forgetting. Telling this story isn't about fascination. It's about memory. It's a warning. And above all, it's respect for those who can no longer speak for themselves. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. Because remembering is the first step toward never repeating.